Architects have AutoCAD. Developers have VS Code. Sales teams have Salesforce. But what do we, as service design professionals, have? Often it's a wall of post-it notes that gets taken down by the cleaners in the evening. This brings up an intriguing and maybe slightly uncomfortable question. Would our work be taken more seriously if we had our own quote-unquote official software tool? Or is our lack of a specific tool actually our greatest superpower? Welcome back to Inside Service Design. This is the series where we peel back the curtain on what it really looks like to do in-house work. We move beyond the shiny case studies and get into the messy reality of budgets, politics, and long-term survival. My name is Mark van Tijn, and today I am joined by two great guests, Will Sharples and Maxe van Heeswijk. In this episode, we tackle some of the hardest parts of the job, the invisible parts. You'll hear Maxe share a provocative idea she brought to our Circle community recently. The debate on whether service design needs its own AutoCAD moment to claim its territory. She also shares a very real story of patience waiting 5 years to finally secure funding for a key initiative. Then Will flips the script on team growth. He shares a thought experiment. If your team were cut in half tomorrow, what would you stop doing? His answer might make you rethink your calendar, especially if it is full of alignment meetings that don't actually align anyone. We also touch on a topic that usually gets ignored in service design, and that is sales. Why do we treat selling like a dirty word when, as Will points out, we are always selling? Whether we are pitching a new project or just explaining why we need a user journey. As always, in these conversations, you'll hear us mention the Circle. That's our community for in-house service design professionals. I started this community because, as you probably know, this work is an endurance race, a marathon that you often run alone. Therefore, the Circle has your back and is your pit crew, the place where you can pull in, get a reality check, and get back on track faster. If you feel that you could benefit as well from having your very own pit crew on your side, check out servicedesignshow.com/circle to see what we do. But for now, let's get into the tools, the politics, and the patience of in-house service design. Here are Maxe and Will. Welcome to the show, Maxe and Will.
Hey, Mark.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, depending on when you're listening to this, could be evening, could be morning, afternoon. We'll see. I know people listen to the podcast on many different occasions. I'm really excited to have this chat with you. We are diving again into the world of in-house service design, but service design in general, like sharing the practical stories, the lived experiences that you both have, sort of trying to lift the curtains on what it actually looks like to do real service design. That's at least the promise. We have a lot to unpack today, but as we always do with these conversations, we like to start with some history, and we are very interested in how you got into service design, so maybe we can unpack that. Maxe, let's start with you. If you look back on your career so far, could you take us back to the moment where you feel that you became a service design professional?
Yeah, of course, happy to do so. Well, to really start first things first, I need to remind myself quite often to the fact that halfway through university, I got my first smartphone. So the whole idea of digital services and products came halfway my education in university. And therefore, by the end that I graduated, it was, I think, easier to also get a job in digital product design than physical product design. And I'm originally educated as a physical product design engineer. But what I really like about service design and digital product design as a combination is that in service design, it is often open what the end result could be. So you're allowed to do research first, find the actual problem that users might have, and then decide what the best fit for a solution should be. So attracted by that, I rolled into the service design side of digital product design, I would say. Yeah.
And what was that? Did you apply for an internship, or how did that go?
It was actually my second job in a service design agency. So that is a quite straightforward service design. And my first actual job was an internship in an architecture firm where I was allowed to design the train of the future, or the future concept of trains in the Netherlands. And this was a dream coming true, to merge like physical space design with the service of offering travelers the opportunity to go from A to B, and then into a future concept that was like car design. Concept design was allowed to be a little bit non-realistic, maybe. It was a super cool experience for at least a year.
Ah, cool. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was a previous episode or the one before where we also had somebody who came from an architecture background. So that seems one of the career paths that people take. Will, what about you? Do you have an architecture background? How did you get into service design?
No, nothing as practical as that, I'm afraid. So I left university with a philosophy degree. So yeah, went from questioning the meaning of life to exactly what I should do with my life. And I fell into advertising because that's what seemed to be the thing to do when you're in London and you didn't necessarily have an architecture or product design degree, which was really fun and exciting for a short amount of time. So big brand campaign ads, so lots of kind of interesting strategic work. But I did feel that the buzz kind of slightly wore off. And what was interesting working in quite a big team like this was that there was another part of the office that were doing something called CX and UX. And I wasn't quite sure what they did, but when I started to speak to them a bit more, it felt like they were doing things that were slightly more tangible than marketing and communications. So I took a product design course, a shout out to Experience House, which is based in London. If anyone's heard of it, they now do a service design course as well. And through doing that, I learned more about the world of product. And because I had a strategy background and because I just learned product, service design felt like something that nicely brought the two together. I then moved into kind of consultancy work, working a lot in the public sector, in the UK government, which is a really interesting way to get training in the service design world because they do really have a clear process that you have to follow, and it's very aligned to service design thinking. I mean, you've had people like Lou down on your podcast itself, so yeah, you really know it's a really good place. It's almost like going to university for service design in the real world. I then moved into contracting, where I did lots of work in the private sector. So I really wanted to get that balance between public and private sector service design. And then, now I've ended up at Toyota, working at a place called Toyota Connected EU, which is almost like a small agency based within Toyota, where I kind of lead the European work, working across a huge kind of range of things.
Going from philosophy to service design, sure, why not? You mentioned something very interesting, Will, that I want to explore further. You mentioned that it felt like the CX side had more tangible results, was more tangible than marketing. That's curious. Like, for me, it always feels the other way around.
I mean, maybe if you're doing kind of email campaigns and you're in the nitty-gritty side of things, you can put something out, you can see a result. We were doing kind of really big brand ads where you'd spend 6 months, a year building up to something. It would go live and then you try to see some results from it. But then it was really hard to distill, okay, have we changed the dial, or is it because, market forces? Are people drinking more Jägermeister because they saw an ad campaign, or because the price of vodka's gone up? And
sure. Okay. No, fair enough. So especially with branding, like, it's super hard to actually feel whether or not you're making an impact. But I'm sure some branding people listening to this will disagree with that. All right. One of the key questions that we have during these conversations is, Well, it's super interesting that you actually mentioned this example. Like, it's hard to see success maybe in branding, but it's often also very hard to see success in service design. Like, we also work on can work on pretty holistic projects that take a lot of time. I'm very curious. Like, on a Friday, we are recording this on Friday, so on Friday afternoon, how do you gauge whether or not you've made progress? How do you define success for yourself? Let's start with you, Will.
Yeah, I think it's interesting being in the circle because it's when new people come in, it's the question that everyone kind of asks, what's success for me in service design? And it's so specific, I think, to the role you're in, because you've got your kind of hard results you're trying to meet, but then also kind of the softer, more personal ones. Now, there's obviously the kind of classic answers around business, making sure that you're kind of hitting business targets, you're hitting kind of sort of user targets, but really thinking specifically about my team at Toyota Connected, I think we've kind of got two kind of hard metrics that I kind of really judge my success on. The first one is just around how many people we have in the team doing projects. That's almost like the financial side. Are we kind of doing the projects that have longevity, that's kind of adding value? And if they are adding value, then we'll kind of get extended and we'll get to grow our team. I think on the other side, success for me is the type of work we're allowed to do. When service design first came to Toyota Motors Europe, we were doing quite kind of high level work. So lots of journey mapping and lots of quick workshops. And that was almost the space we were allowed to play in. And now, because we've established ourselves, we've built trust, I think a lot more of the work we're doing is deeper. It's really diving into specific areas. So I think success for me on a kind of day-to-day is, are we be given the license to tackle those really interesting service design briefs that, at least for my team, has taken quite a long time to kind of earn the right to be allowed to work on.
Okay, fair enough, but I'm not fully sort of convinced or satisfied with your reply, Will, because getting to those projects still, I can imagine, can take a while, right? Before you have built the relationships, the trust internally, like, I don't know, can 3, 6, 12 months. And then it's Friday afternoon, like today. Like, how do you know if you're making progress?
Yeah, I mean, that is a really good question. I suppose you've got your kind of, it's interesting when we look at, I suppose, feedback in the wild was something that comes up a lot in other people. Are we kind of getting that sense from people that we're making kind of progress? It's a really hard question to answer that I think is very specific on particular projects, and I think it's really how you've laid out your projects, I would say. We've tried to have a kind of series of metrics where we've analysed our service design team against, more generally, where are we on the kind of service design maturity scale, and we try to reflect that kind of every year to say, have we moved ourselves, on those kind of core dials. In terms of Friday, in terms of how we're making progress, we've got some really interesting meetings. We've pushed kind of projects forward. So I think on have we kind of finished the week happy, for me is probably the kind of key measurement, and I'd say yes.
Okay, thanks for sharing, Max. Well, how do you view that? Like, what does success look like for you on a Friday afternoon?
Well, there's multiple things going through my mind. Listening to Will, I also realized that what I learned while being an in-house service designer for a little bit more than 5 years now is that maybe service design is not for every type of client. You need maybe some sort of maturity of developing new products in a certain client to appreciate the design process. And what I'm more specifically trying to say is sometimes we have clients who have an idea in their mind and they want the prototype ASAP. Well, then any method or any step of service design that you're proposing to do first to figure out who's the actual target group or what's the actual problem is bothering them, because they expect a prototype as soon as possible. So I also learned that maybe for these clients, service design is not the way to go first. Maybe you first give them the prototype and then you start doing research later. So success in service design doesn't work for any type of client. That's a learning from my side. Um, However, to share something more concrete that happened this week that me and my other service design colleague really celebrated as success is we're finally allowed to build a journey mapping library for a year now, and the financials were continued for at least 1 or 2 more years. So I think this is something to celebrate in the first place, that you get continuous money to continue work on a project, and that you apparently had the capabilities to explain that there is something like short-term success, but service design is basically, I think, long-term success, and also therefore needs long-term investments. So as soon as you get these long-term investments, that's a worth celebration. But the second more important thing is that we managed to get 2 internal employees on board to collaborate with us as well. They got so enthusiastic about what we're doing. We got them unstuck in the way they were doing their work. So they saw the light through our methodologies and really wanted to continue working with us this year. And that's something we really celebrated, because we can drive service design projects, but it's even better if people want to jump on our train, right? So this made us really happy. Yeah.
Well, congratulations, first of all,
Thank
that
you.
you made it. But this is also one of those interesting use cases because, as you described, it probably took you a while to secure the funding, to build the trust. And now that it's there, you can pop the champagne and sort of celebrate. But all those weeks prior, how did you know that you were moving in the right direction?
That's a very good question, because there was a lot of insecurity. And I think in this case, we had the good news that one of our I work in a in-house service design setup, that we're basically an in-house agency. So we're 100% daughter company, but that means that all my direct colleagues are UX designers and UX researchers, developers, data scientists, and so on. And we have the luck maybe that we have our own bubble inside the big corporate. And one of our research directors moved into a very important position to the client side. So we trusted, even though there's a lot of politics going on, that this new this new client actually that comes from us knows by heart what we're trying to achieve and trying to do. Because as you mentioned, it's not only weeks that we worked on this project since this year officially, but it's actually already for 5 years going on that we try to fight for a journey library, of course. So it is definitely a long-term investment and insecurity. We started this initiative multiple times already before, having different names. I think this is what many people recognize when working in large corporates as well, maybe. But yeah, you need to be patient working in-house, I think.
Yeah, but there's the crux, right? You need to be patient, absolutely. But how do you sort of keep the faith, the trust, the hope that things are going in the right? Like, again, today is Friday, and well, this week you had this big milestone. But in all the other weeks, how do you, like, what are the weak signals that you look for to know, okay, we don't have the signature yet, but we're inching closer? How do you know that?
Well, what's a very clear sign to me, next to being part of course, the circle and hearing people having similar challenges, so that knowing that you're not alone in the world, knowing that there's many more companies where people didn't solve the case yet. The world is getting more complex. We're designing more digital services, more digital products. They're going to be more connected, or they should be more connected and collaborate together. I think even AI is showing us that bots can think and make connections for us if we put in some prompts. So in the background, it gets more complicated. And humans cannot keep thinking in, I'm working on my product or my piece of software, and I don't care what's going on around it. So I think me and my fellow service design colleagues are still quite certain of the case that one day people will ask for people who detangle the complexity and support them. And I think this is also the reason that we got the continuous funding for the project, and that people want to jump in our train, because compared to some other disciplines, we are not afraid to try to tackle the complexity and at least give it a try, visualize things, try things out, and always fight for better trying to map out something and define our white spots and making clear what's unknown than keep hiding.
All right, I'll take that one. And I agree with you that it feels like service design is sort of like the undercurrent, like it's an invisible wave, and we have to survive all those hype waves of technology that come over us. But we know that we sort of slowly inching, moving towards the right direction and not get distracted, because I think that's maybe the biggest risk. All right.
I still believe in the service design case methodology and what we can bring to the table. So maybe that's what's kept us going.
and it's becoming even more important. But again, if all the news and media and PR is going to the fancy new next thing, then yeah, it can be sometimes tough to keep that patience and to keep that hope and trust. You both mentioned briefly the circle. If somebody is listening to us and has listened to some of the previous episodes, they'll know that the circle is this community that we have for in-house service design professionals, which we have been running close to 5 years. Right now, we get together multiple times a month to share wins, failures, best practices. Sometimes it feels like therapy. Other times it feels like rolling up our sleeves and getting really practical. In the past months, you both hosted a session in our community. I would like to double click on that and see what the topics were. Of course, I know what the topics were, but let's explain that to the audience. Will, your session was already, I think a few months ago at least. And that was in our seeding and scaling season. So we have every quarter, we have a different season. Back then we were in seeding and scaling. Do you recall what topic you decided to explore at our dinner table session and why?
Yes, I do recall. So, although it was back in August, so it felt like a lifetime ago when the sun was shining. Seed, Stretch and Stall was the name, and we were really looking at what happens when teams shrink or grow. What's the work that they keep doing, and what's the work that they kind of stop doing, and what's the impact of that? The reason I wanted to look at it was because previously I've been part of really big service design teams that have shrunk because company directions have gone in different ways. I'm now in the fortunate position where we're growing service design in Toyota, and it's a kind of positive story. And what I see, we quite often ask, okay, what's the value of service design? What's the most important things we do in our day to day? So if we basically just did that thought experiment of, if your team got cut in half, what's the things you would actually keep? Because that's quite an interesting litmus test to see what is the most valuable things that we do day to day, and what's the fat that we feel like we have to do because we're a big team, but isn't necessarily adding the value. You don't have to do all these extra kind of ceremonies and stuff per se, just because you're a bigger team. And yeah, we reflected on how obviously smaller teams bring sharper focus. But what is interesting is that people felt that in much smaller teams, they still needed rituals to stay healthy. It doesn't mean that because you're a small team, you always have to work in these kind of very ad hoc fashions. And as teams grow, a lot of people felt that rituals kind of became sort of too large, too numerous, daily stand-ups, daily check-ins. And although more alignment felt like it was actually needed, it didn't necessarily add to any increased output. Now, it's a really tricky thing because when you're a team of two, you don't need to do your alignment because it's all in your head or the other person's, and it kind of works. So it's a bit tricky to say that alignment is a waste of time when you're a bigger team. But it definitely felt like lots of kind of case study sharing and stuff wasn't always leading to better output of service design and adding to value. So within basically creating all those kind of extra things, were they creating value? Creating lots of presentations, sharing work as well. It felt like it kind of grew quite a lot when you're when you're growing as a team. And again, that wasn't necessarily that useful. I think what people wanted to really think about is, if you create all these case studies because you're a big team now and you want to be sharing your work, is that necessarily going to be adding more value? Instead, could you kind of create more kind of assets that worked for you in much harder ways? So if there were two of you, could you create more kind of living assets that could be shared more widely?
This is an interesting thought experiment. So if your team would be cut in half, or if you would double, what made you decide that this was an interesting topic? Like, what was on your mind when you started thinking about this?
Essentially, we had started taking on more people, and I felt like my time was being pulled quite a lot in different directions to kind of facilitate to onboard. So it was really from a kind of selfish perspective of, what can I be doing that's the most efficient of my time, rather than just kind of falling into the trap that I've kind of seen as teams kind of normally grow, which is start putting all these barriers and ring fences. And essentially, what can we do to share information with each other? I think that's really what it came down to, is the more people, the more information lives in different heads, the more time is spent sharing that information. So I suppose the kind of service design solution for that is make sure you can just draw it out of people in much more efficient ways, so that they can go and look for it in their own time. So I suppose one of the things that came out was the example of trying to turn almost like case studies or work into living ledgers. So we're quite fortunate in service design that lots of our work lives on boards. As you're going through the process, how can you make those boards kind of tell stories in their own right, rather than necessarily having to give someone a kind of half an hour stand up to update them on the work you've been doing? How can you let them come in and use it in your own time? One of the things we created off the back of that is essentially using Airtable is a bit of a service design archive that's really restructured around how the connected technologies team in Toyota actually structures their business. And what that has meant is, rather than service design being the kind of owners of all the work, people can go in, they can find their own things, they can explore in their own way, to the level that they need to, and then they can come to us with a series of questions that's quite specific, rather than, hey, I'm joining this project, can you tell me all about it? So yeah, it's basically trying to use assets in a much more efficient way, because we've got so many tools that can help us there.
Interesting. As we said, probably this is a good exercise for everybody to do once, I don't know, every 3-6 months, and to think about what's the most valuable aspect of your work, and why are you doing all the other stuff? Is it because it's become a ritual, or is it actually adding value? All right. One of the things you already mentioned is that a lot of our work is on boards, for example, but also a lot of information and knowledge and experience lives inside heads. Max, in your session, you took an approach where we said, actually, a lot of the work that we do is quote unquote invisible, and even more of the outcomes that we produce, the value that we produce, isn't seen either. So tell us a little bit more about how you approach your session and how that connected to this topic.
Yeah, so in my session, Mark, we had some conversations beforehand, of course, and we tried to trigger the crowd, I would say, by putting a statement out that maybe having our own software would make it easier to be visible, to invite people to our space, and maybe as a third benefit, also claim a little bit our expertise, because as soon as you enter the software, or as soon as you need the software, it's clear that it is the service design area where you need service design experts. And yeah, it was very interesting.
Let's pause for a moment there, because I think that it's important to sort of set the stage. The claim, or what did you say? The provocation that you put out was, if we have a dedicated tool, in this case maybe software, people would appreciate us more, see us more, respect us more. And just like, I don't know, somebody who's doing product design has AutoCAD, or somebody, I don't know, who's a painter has a special paintbrush. Like you sort of appreciate professionals through their tools, right? That was like the provocation.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what happened?
Well, of course, you have people agreeing on beforehand, before the session, very strictly on yes or no. And during the session, being in conversations, hearing each other's argument, and especially experiences that people have having or not having their own software, made people change their mind, I think. To jump into the conclusion very straight, of course, we don't need, and we're not dependent on a piece of software or a tool to defend who we are or defend what we do. But it was still interesting to see with what experiments or experiences, examples people came up in which situations it can make sense to claim your field by having your tools.
What's an example that stuck with you?
Yeah, what I see personally in my daily work, having a lot of UX design colleagues or UX research colleagues, is that people can do brainstorms themselves, not being a design expert, or people can create a great idea for a new digital product themselves without having experiences. But as soon as you need a prototype, or it goes a little bit further than sketching a wireframe, you realize, we need Figma or another tool here. And since I don't know how to operate this right now, I would need time to learn about this tool. I'd rather reach out to a design agency and ask a professional to do it for me. And the benefit that I get is that this professional can add their experience to the design as well. And therefore, it makes totally sense to pay someone to do it for me. And this is something that at least I see around me is not always so clear when you try to sell service design. The tools are quite accessible, and I think our methods are quite accessible because we often organize them through co-creational activities or workshops. And of course, that's what we aim to do: bring different people and disciplines to the table and make sure that they listen to each other. So sometimes I think we use ourselves as a tool as well. But still, the problem, therefore, is that our added value stays invisible. So it's very interesting to at least think about this mental model of how to claim our expertise a little bit more. And could software, a tool, help us defining the border of it? Or will it give us only new problems?
Mm-hmm.
Should we continue as we do it and not be bothered by what our other design colleagues are doing or having?
That's interesting, because getting sort of permission to use software. Well, you just gave this example that you now finally have the funding after, 5 years to actually do that. So that creates other problems because you have to convince people who don't use the software that you actually need. I remember from that session that I think one of the questions that you posed was also like, what is the invisible value that we create, or what is the value that's staying invisible? Like, so many things came up. I think it was super interesting to see all these professionals reflect on what they do and what value they create. Did you notice that as well? Like that we know it, but we're not very vocal about it for ourselves either?
Yes.
We take it for granted for a large part.
Yeah, and for me, that fits also a bit into not the problem, but the challenge, maybe, to put it more positively, that I've worked on some return on investment models and of course, what's the benefit of service design models before? And what always sticks to me is that we have short-term impact and we have long-term impact. And what I also saw in the responses of fellow service designers is, on the short term, we have a lot of soft skill value, I would say, bringing people together, make sure people are heard, make sure we find the right people in the organization, the right experts, find the right tools and methods, make sure people are open to work with other disciplines. And all these things that I just named, they're so hard to measure, especially in the hard metrics that also Will mentioned as the business success that people often ask for. Thinking about this happening in the longer term anyway, but it is hard to express in metrics. What do you do to make people work together, collaborate, and also the change management that happens in people's mind along the way, being more open for innovation, being more open for new solutions, or what the user thinks of the problem, for example. So in a way, it was not new to me that people write these things down as well as our hidden value. I mean, you can still not measure them through using software, but at least it may become more visible because you document it in a way. And this is something that we'll also mention, that it's how do we archive our results? Because what we as service designers do in our case is we work project based. So we're everywhere in the organization depending on where the projects are. And if your project was successful in such a way that you have a follow-up project, you continue working on a topic, but quite often you work on different topics. So working at this company now for 5 years, my knowledge in the organization, about the organization, is super scattered, but it's all in my mind. And this is a pity, because it's in my mind, I can't show it. So next to having metrics to show your value, visibility an sich, just making visible what you know, would be a valuable thing. And yes, there's Miro. Of course, we work with Miro. But I think the interesting case with Miro, and we also discussed this in the session, is that we try to use it as an open source. We try to invite as many people as possible
Democratized
to
service
use
design,
Miro along with us. And also when we disappear in projects and the team still continues, they are allowed to use Miro and everything that we achieve for them without us. But they can also break it down. They can also destroy it. So maybe Miro is too democratized.
It looks too easy. They've made it too easy to use.
Yeah, and to break things down and to put your own perspective on it. So maybe there's too less rules in Miro to maintain the service design mindset after you leave as a service designer. I don't know.
So what does this mean for you? Like, what did you take out of that conversation?
Well, I got the strength to continue without specific software. Especially this is something that we, in our case, won't get anytime soon. It's also a case that we fight for over 5 years already. And I feel more strengthened that our creativity, we are creative, I think, as service designers. We have a large toolbox, will allow us to maybe use the tools that we have in such a way to create our own agents or our own rules or surroundings with the tools that we already have. We shouldn't wait for any specific service design tool or wait for the allowance to use something. Yeah.
Well, that confidence part is one of those invisible, hard to measure aspects of being part of a professional community of practice where people like you sort of give these answers well. But like adding on top, do you already envision or had some insights, some clues on are there ways for you to make your value more tangible? Or are you already doing that as good as you can?
I think you can always do more or try more, experiment more.
But you, in this specific case,
yeah, me myself as well. I think I'm never finished until maybe I have a 100% success rate showing what I'm doing. And since that's not the case yet, there's always room for improvement, right?
So do you have an idea? Like, did the session give you an idea of what to try, what to experiment next?
I definitely want to continue working on my ROI model. I quit working on it for 2 years now. And I still see the value of communicating the more soft skill, like short-term benefits, more often. On the other hand, I also joined your course, Mark, Selling Service Design with Confidence. And first, I think you need to be able to identify the pain that your customer has in not having these short-term, for example, collaboration benefits or working with multiple disciplines and so on. So there's 2 things for me to work on, I would say.
Okay.
Conversations with my client and expressing this in a visualized way that it convinced them to spend some money on it.
This is maybe one of the projects we'll take on in the community this year, because everybody who is doing service design in-house has these challenges. And I feel that all of us have a small piece of the puzzle. Somebody is using this tool or this method or this framework to communicate value. Somebody is using something else. And having an easy to access cheat sheet, library, whatever you want to call it, could be super useful. So this is my mental note for me. Yeah.
Yeah, plus what I mentioned before, maybe service design is not for every type of client.
It's surely not. It's not for every type of client.
Something that I can live with right now more than 5 years ago.
Okay. Thanks for sharing. Will, to finish off this sort of section with you, doubling your service design team, cutting it in half. What did you take from that session? Because you put this topic on the dinner table, literally. What was your takeaway?
Make your assets do the hard work, because lots and lots of alignment meetings don't actually always lead to kind of greater results. It's really hard to get a 15-minute update from someone. There's value to see where people are going, but it's not necessarily going to really help drive your project. It's quite easy work to kind of meet every week or so to kind of for an hour and share general progress updates between different projects. But actually, if you really want to kind of help each other when you're working in a growing team, you have to do the hard work of creating assets that can be used. And by that, I mean really tell the story within the work that you're doing, which actually does take time. So we've tried to reduce the amount of kind of alignment sessions we have as a kind of wider service design team. But what we do try to do is really put effort into not just having kind of living boards that have a blueprint, but making sure that we can tell the story within those boards. So whether that's a presentation attached to it or whatever it is, someone can pick it up without context and really understand the process we've been on. And that helps both the person writing it, because it makes sure they're distilling what they've done into a really clear story, but also the person reading it, because they can digest it in their own time, take the bits they need. So yeah, I think not just lazy kind of big team meetings, but kind of do the hard work and then share back.
So to make this practical, is it that when you are, for instance, creating a mirror board, alongside that you have somebody document the process and create, I don't know, a reading guide or a presentation or a screen recording? Like, what does that look like? Yeah,
I think we do it in presentations, whether that lives as slides within there that can kind of explain the wider story, or a kind of PowerPoint or something that lives on the side of it. But yeah, basically make sure it can be understood without you necessarily having to talk through all of it. Because firstly, it really forces your thinking to make sure that you're really clear on exactly what happened without being able to kind of talk over it. And secondly, it means that we've got really nice stories and artifacts that we can share with other members of the team and other members of the business. So I think, yeah, do the hard work in your own time to really tell that story. And that's probably a better use of an hour rather than kind of more kind of softer catch-ups.
Yeah. And when you say do the hard work, it's actually the important work. And I can imagine that initially, you always, when you're doing this type of work, you always feel rushed. There is never time to reflect, to document. And now you're sort of, quote unquote, forcing people to do that. Because if they do it now, they'll save a bunch of time later.
Yeah. And the UK public sector is quite good at this, because they've got a 3-stage process, right? You do a discovery, you write up what you did, and you get grilled on it for a few hours. And if your story's not clear, you can't progress to alpha and then finally beta. So we've tried to take a similar method, really, which is like, do we want to progress with this? Can we tell our story of why we deserve that? And then if not, let's go back and kind of change that. So we've actually used a bit of a similar model to that.
Thank you for doing these sessions and exploring this. It's always fascinating to hear all those similarities at the dinner table. Even though in the circle we have, I think, people from 20 different countries. I don't know how many different types of industries. There is so much, so many things that are relatable across all these fields. So yeah. Moving on to our final section of this conversation, I want to look at in-house service design maybe more in depth. So we talked about your journey, we talked about the topics at the dinner table, but now let's talk a little bit about doing service design in-house. Max, if I go back to you, I'm really curious, like if you look back on the lessons that you learned in the last years, what do you feel is maybe the hardest lesson that you had to learn? Most challenging one?
Being an in-house service designer?
Yeah.
That it really takes time to build a network, I think. I think after 2 years, I experienced literally that previous clients came back because they remembered what we did before, or they heard from other people what we achieved for them, and they want something similar. So I think when you start your career, being in a job for 2 years sounds like ages already, and you learned so much and you know so much already. But building a network really takes time, and without this network, I think it's very hard in a large corporate to find the right people. And it takes, of course, more than one conversation or one coffee chat to get the confidence and the trust that your client needs to hire you or continue the conversation with you. So yeah, this was a lesson that definitely took time. And I'm here for 5 years now, so I'm taking I take the benefits of it for 3 years now. And sometimes I'm afraid if I ever move on, will I need to invest the same amount of time first again? Or are there maybe some shortcuts that I could take to build this trust sooner, or find the right people sooner, build this network sooner? Because now it grew organically. Maybe there are tricks. I don't know.
Well, yeah. You mentioned it grew organically, but I sort of questioned that, and I think I know what you're getting at. That maybe you can be more intentional. But going back to your topic about software, like when you were sharing this lesson, what came to my mind is if you would be a farmer, like a physical farm, and you sort of, I don't know, want to grow potatoes, you seed, and then you don't expect the next day to actually have some plants. You know that it's going to take a lot of time and effort before you see those things grow. So in my mind, I was thinking about software. Like, would it be helpful to have like some kind of way to visualize how your how should we call this? How your land, how your network land, how your relationship value is growing, because that's going to make it more tangible, right? Does that make sense?
Yes, and me and my service design colleagues, we've also tried in multiple ways to visualize with maps the organizational structures, visualize where we do have connections or ambassadors yet. How we try to apply strategies like how do you say this? Make the people eat service design who are actually hungry. Also, invest only the time in attracting people where you already know or can feel they're really interested. Because as Will also said, you can spend tons of time on alignment and meetings and meeting people, but if these people are not the right people, it's easily wasted time. So I think the visualization part is something that we, of course, try to do, but it's harder maybe to pinpoint in which direction it will pay off the most. And something I also remember from the Selling Service Design course with Confidence, Mark, and the conversation that we had is that at a certain point, I was a little bit disappointed that sometimes you have clients which hidden, not on purpose maybe, but their hidden goal is to get promoted and not to get the best out of it for the customer, or create a prototype that actually makes sense. And there was a point that I was really disappointed at that. I was like, okay, so some people don't want to do service design because they truly believe in what I believe, but just to help themselves. And now I'm one step further again, and I realize these people will always be there, but it's my job to find the people who are on the same page like me, or the clients who have more common ground or overlapping thoughts with what I'm trying to achieve with service design. So I try to be more picky, maybe also.
I feel that we should invite somebody with a very strong sales background onto the podcast, because we're doing basically the same. In sales, they have like extreme sophisticated software tools to track pipelines, to see how their deal progress is going, how their relationship status is going, when they need to reach back out. Sales and selling and money in service design feels often like a taboo, but there are so many parallels that we are probably underutilizing. So, okay, if somebody is listening and knows somebody from sales who also understands a little bit of design, let's bring them on the podcast. Will, what was the hardest lesson for you?
I think it's definitely interesting picking up on that theme. I think that working in consultancies, they do have that selling pipeline, right? They have a sales team, they have an intake, and they are a bit of a selling machine. And then it comes to you with that kind of sales package wrapped up. So it'd be interesting to look at that from who is that person in in-house teams when they get to a certain size. Normally, when you get to a certain size, you normally need someone in design ops, right, who can sort your intake, maybe do some of the selling, but at least kind of set up the project for you. I think I've got two key learnings, I suppose, that kind of really changed how I thought when I moved into in-house. And the first one is being pragmatic. I'd read some of the Bibles. This is service design doing. I'd read Lou Down, good services, and I knew the process, and I felt like I could execute the process of how to do service design. And when I was working for consultancies or other places where a brief was kind of made, you can follow the process, and you're really encouraged to. In-house, people don't really care. They don't have the time to worry about what your service design process is. You have to be really pragmatic. So you go from this is our process to this is a set of toolkits that I have in my back pocket. I'm going to find your what your problem is, and then I'm going to use my tools, whether you know it or not, to help you solve that. I think I was quite lucky that my predecessor, Dashana, who I have convinced to join the circle, she came in and she saw that service design wasn't established at Toyota Connected. So she worked really good at speed. She juggled lots and lots of briefs. She did workshops. She got the kind of name out there, and she worked quite pragmatically to really kind of share the knowledge of, hey, this is what service design can do. Hello, waving the hand. Then when people did learn about us and they established us in the process, big projects have to go through service design at certain gates. We have that overview now, and we're really part of the journey. The next level, that kind of pragmatism is, okay, well, let's pick the ones that we can go a bit deeper on. And then the second one, picking up from your point, Max, as well, is that you are always selling. We have matured from nobody knowing who we are to being an established part of the process, but that doesn't mean that we ever have to stop selling what we do. I still get people messaging me saying, hey, I'm presenting this in a few days, and it says I need a user journey. Do you think you could make me one? That kind of education side is always going on, and it might be because there's new parts of the business that have never heard what you do. So, we work with Europe, but there are other parts of the world that we kind of are explaining. But it also is just because there's a new PO that has come from a completely different company that hasn't worked with service design, and they're saying, well, why are you slowing it down? I want this to go to development next week. You're saying, oh, no, this is how we try to do things. And that selling at the high level and the low level, I think, never stops. I think when we look for new people to bring onto our team, we don't just test if people know the process. We really have to stress test is, can they get away with the process, and can they really sell the value and sell their ideas of why they're doing certain things in the process to people that, to be honest, don't really care, similar to Max says, of they have outputs and outcomes they need to achieve, and we're there to do that. So that's something we really look for, is people that can be really pragmatic and kind of the right type of salesy, I suppose, to kind of make sure we're following the process as well as we can.
It's we touched upon sales, and I think it's such an important skill to develop. Again, I was sort of reflecting while you were sharing this. The software that is used within sales is often called CRM, and it's called relationship management. It's not called sales management, but it's about managing relationships. We could argue whether or not the C of customer is applicable to us, but like, what kind of relationship management are we doing? I think we're doing a lot of it, but going back to the point of this conversation, it's very invisible, maybe unstructured, organic. Could we benefit by doing that more intentional? And if so, what would that look like? Would we just adopt a CRM tool? Again, I would love to see some comments on this episode. One final thing before we leave, and that is that we always end this episode with a question. And that is your opportunity to ask the community who's listening right now, whether or not they are in-house or not, what would you like to know from a service design professional? Max, let's start with you.
Maybe how other in-house service designers deal with company politics. I think one assumption that I had before I started as an in-house service designer is that as soon as you're in-house, that it's easier to learn about the politics going on, play with it, and learn about how to position yourself to get to the right projects and the right people. I learned after 5 years that I think company politics is on one hand still something that doesn't come naturally maybe to me, or I know too less about. Maybe there's people who did a course or read a book or gained some lessons that we could learn from, because it is such an important factor in understanding your position and how to play the game. It's something you definitely don't get as a course in design education. But there are probably people being more aware or having more experience in this. So I would be really interested to have a session about company politics and how to take a benefit from knowing more about it.
Design is politics. That would be a great episode for the podcast. Again, if anyone is listening and has a recommendation, please let us know. Will, you had a moment to think about this question. What would you like to ask?
I would say, what is your company or organization or client doing that is service design under another name? So the reason why I say that is, before I came to Toyota, I was probably quite arrogant that IDEO to creative design thinking, we've kind of progressed it. But before that, it was just people working in this waterfall way, and we've reinvented the world here, and everyone has to see this way. And it was kind of coming to a company that was building cars where the stakes are pretty high. They have so much language and they have so many terms that are service design related that they've been doing for kind of over a century. So I'm going to give you a very quick Japanese lesson. So Kaizen is a word that I'm sure we know, which means continuous improvement. That's a fundamental kind of Toyota word and part of their process. Genchi Genbutsu is the term to go and actually see a problem for yourself. Don't get someone to tell you about it. Go down onto the floor. Obeya just means big room thinking. So don't all just do it on your own desks. Get a big room. There's actually a really long list of them, and I kind of encourage people. And lots of the success is just reframing what we think we've created new, just in that language. And I'm sure lots of other organizations or clients are doing a similar thing. So find out what their service design language is under a different guise, and then maybe see if that will help you kind of get a foot in the door by speaking their language a bit more.
Awesome. Thanks. That's a good exercise. Would be interesting to see like a dictionary in some shape or form. Will, Max, thank you, first of all, for coming on and sharing your experience with us. Thank you for being amazing Circle community members. I wish you all the best on your journey spreading service design throughout the organizations that you're in. Keep doing what you're doing, because we need more people like you. So thanks again.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
I love how this conversation went from the tangible, do we need software, to the deeply strategic, how do we measure the value of relationships? It's an important reminder that while we might not have our very own Salesforce for service design just yet, We are essentially managing relationships and social capital every single day. As Max said, building that network is slow farming, not a quick hack. I'm taking away Will's challenge to do the hard work of documenting our process so it can live without us, rather than relying on endless meetings to keep people in the loop. And I'm definitely keeping Max's reminder in mind. Sometimes the win is just to stay in the game long enough to be there when the organization is finally ready for you. Max also asked a great question that I want to pass on to you. How do you deal with company politics? Do you have a strategy for it, or is it something that you just try to avoid? It's definitely a course that they didn't teach us in design school, but they should have. Let me know your thoughts in the comments on YouTube or Spotify. And finally, if you are tired of figuring out the politics all by yourself, come join us in the Circle community. It is the place where you can get in the room with other in-house service design professionals like you and share notes on everything from stakeholder management to return on investment models. We all have a piece of the puzzle, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel all by yourself. So if you want to tap into the collective wisdom of the community, head over to servicedesignshow.com/circle for all the info on how you can join us. My name is Mark Fontijn. Thanks for listening to the Service Design Show. Keep planting those seeds, and I'll catch you in the next episode.